and welcome to Kent County Closeup. I'm Deb Havens, Democratic candidate for Kent County Commission in Plainfield Township and the City of Rockford. I'm extremely proud of Democratic candidates running with me, and this show is about restoring quality education, environment, and high-paying jobs to Michigan and our nation. My guest today is Cathy Albro, the Democratic candidate seeking to unseat current Representative Justin Amash in the 3rd Congressional District, comprised of Kent, Berry, Ionia, a little bit of Montcalm, and Calhoun counties. Cathy began her career as a teacher in East Grand Rapids. She moved on to create the Creative Learning Center for preschoolers, one of the first child care centers in the educational daycare movement. She's a wife, a mother, and a grandmother who has decided to enter the political world with her challenge to the man who has held the seat for 8 years. So, Cathy, welcome.
Thank you, Deb.
I'm very glad to have you here. Let's jump right in. You've said that you were motivated to run when you learned about the impact on elected officials of dark money.
Right.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, dark money means money that we don't know where it's going, where it's coming from. So I read the book Dark Money by Jane Mayer, which got into a lot of detail, enough to give you a headache. But for decades, there has been money, mostly from Republicans, but a few Democrats too, where it has been filtered through to think tanks and universities and nonprofits. So it's tax deductible even, where it goes to helping policymakers or influencing policymakers to make decisions based on who's donating to the cause.
So your concern being that it's not exactly like people are actually electing people that represent them.
Right.
So much as the lobby impact.
Exactly, and we can see it. I mean, we've got the pharmaceuticals that are in charge of drug prices. We've got NRA. I mean, the list could go on as far as the issue. Every issue has a lobbyist.
And you decided you wanted to do something about it.
Well, I've been, as a teacher, and I know this is one of your questions, I've been concerned about equity in education for 30 years. And the dark money is the tipping point that made me decide that I wanted to run for Congress.
Wow, okay. So let's explore some of your policy platform issues just a little more deeply here. We've already talked a little bit about education. So before we go into your positions, let's take a look at your opponent's point of view. And this is a quote from our current representative, Justin Amash, who is congratulating Betsy DeVos on her appointment. And of course, this happened not too long ago when she was the Trump choice for Secretary of Education. And if we could see that, that graphic up here, note that he is really complimenting her on her, what he calls her initiative to empower parents and local communities. Key phrase here, advance school choice and competition, protect the right of homeschooling. And this one really is kind of illustrative, I think, that stopping federal mandates and harmful initiatives like Race to the Top and Common Core. What are your thoughts on his wholesale support of Betsy DeVos positions?
Well, first of all, we have to keep in mind that the DeVosses donate quite a bit of money to Justin Amash's campaign and the Republican Party, like $1 million to the Republican Party or more in the last year. And Justin Amash is also a libertarian who believes in free market. So it makes sense that he believes that instead of public support of schools and education, that we open it up to the free market, which means that for-profit businesses may own schools, religious schools, whatever, that our tax dollars should go to fund those types of schools. I believe that we should strengthen our public schools. I taught in public schools, went to public schools. I believe that we can, with the right funding, the right leadership, we can make our public schools the greatest, the best. And it's happening all over the country. There are model community public schools that we should be looking at and using those models.
Well, Of course, 3 days after Mr. Amash issued that statement, then he introduced legislation to eliminate the Department of Education altogether. So it
Which
really
didn't go anywhere. but-
Fortunately, I mean, that's my opinion. I guess I should ask yours. How would you respond to that sort of legislative initiative?
I believe that the Department of Education plays a very important role. Well, there are many important roles. All of the title programs for special ed and training teachers, and they just got rid of the program that would help these for-profit colleges, would help people sue these for-profit colleges. So, I mean, that's back to being a thing. But I believe that the Department of Education's responsibility should be to ensure equity, that every state has to meet certain standards to provide equity to all of the children in their state. Right now, 4 states have policies that give the right amount of funding and support to high poverty schools, where the children who need the most get the most. Michigan is not one of those, as you might guess. So I think it's the federal government's responsibility to hold every state accountable, and then it's each state's responsibility to meet those accountability standards.
In fact, you did work on Common Core.
Right, I did. I've worked in many, many schools, actually developing curriculum with teachers. And I really like Common Core because they are very generalized standards, and then teachers have the opportunity to teach them or to help children learn in whatever way meets their needs. And every child's different, every classroom's different. So I thought they were very high standards, and allowed teachers to integrate their curriculum. So if they were working on a project, I developed many projects based on Common Core standards, and children love them.
Right, so it's not exactly like you're issuing a specific lesson plan for every standard.
No, the standard is very, matter of fact, but it's up to the teacher to be creative with that.
Right. So let's go back to your statement about equity in education. And you've defined this as support for teachers and promoting early childhood education, expanding career education, and even free community college. How do you see that being paid for?
Well, we definitely need to reprioritize our budget because it should reflect what is best for the people, making sure we have a return on investment for what taxpayers are actually funding. So I'm not saying that we should necessarily raise taxes. I'm saying let's figure out where we're spending too much money on other things and change our priorities to education.
And of course in Michigan, because we have so many schools for profit here, I think it's something like 80% of charter schools are for profit based. The thought that taxpayer dollars are going into a private pocket somewhere does seem like...
And I have observed in these charter schools, and the quality is not as good as many public schools. I mean, they still have large class sizes, and their motive is profit.
Right. Well, let's switch to a broader topic, which concerns universal health care. I guess this is not broader than education when you think about it, but this is something that your opponent has claimed should be left to the states. Apparently his point seems to be that just because everybody in Vermont might like to have medical care available to them, that doesn't mean that everybody in Michigan would like to have medical care, and that the federal government shouldn't be supporting or imposing its will on these states. So what about his point? Because I guess the mandated insurance purchase that was necessary to fund the Affordable Care Act has come under fire by a lot of people, and how do you feel about that?
Well, I think we need to look at it entirely different and think about this whole country being one big pool of people that needs to have medical care. And we can actually eliminate that layer of insurance companies by having a single payer system. Right now, there's about 25 to 30% that's of overhead going to insurance companies that we would not necessarily have to be paying. I think the research shows that a single payer system would have about a 4% overhead. So it makes sense. A lot of people believe that our taxes are going to go way up, but what they don't understand is that all of the medical insurance costs, co-pays, pharmaceutical costs, all of that will go away. So it actually will be a net loss of what we would have to pay less.
What about the complaint that suddenly there would be disaster in the insurance agency world, I guess, where businesses would go bankrupt because they're no longer involved in this?
We certainly have to plan for that, but I mean, that can't be the reason why we stay with this plan, the way that the system that we have now. We have to look ahead, and it's just like renewable energy, which we may be talking about too. We know that fossil fuels contribute to global warming or climate change. We also know that this extra layer of bureaucracy with medical care adds more to our costs and our drug costs. So we can't let that be the reason why we're not changing.
You also support raising the minimum wage,
Yes.
which you suggest would encourage fiscal responsibility and self-sufficiency, which is kind of an interesting take on this. I'm interested in how you interpret that.
Well, for fiscal responsibility, I think what I probably meant there was that the programs that the government now offers to people who need subsidized housing and food and other life-supporting needs would not necessarily be that prevalent because people would be making a higher wage. So they would be self-sufficient. And that's what we want, right? I think that's what everybody wants is for people to be able to pay their own way.
Right, it does seem ridiculous that people can be working 2 or 3 jobs and still not be able to have food stamps.
Well, and then on top of that, they're working much more than a 40-hour week to be able to accomplish that.
And the impact on families and, well, even the ability to have a family, really, if you can't afford to pay for your child's care. That must be a devastating experience just to live through.
Yes, yep. And I do believe we need to be subsidizing childcare, quality childcare.
You're also advocating for clean environment, and chief among concerns, of course, here in West Michigan, the polyfluorochemicals that are known as PFAS and PFOS, found in drinking water just about everywhere now. Michigan Senator Gary Peters chaired the first ever United States Senate hearing on PFAS. What are we hearing from Representative Amash's office on this?
I haven't heard anything. I've been looking. People have told me that they've contacted his office and have had no response or a form letter. So as far as I know, nothing. I do believe that as a congressperson that they are responsible for making sure that we have laws that protect our water and our air.
How would you work with the EPA to resolve that situation?
Well, first of all, I think they've let a lot of their scientists go. I'd start listening to what scientists have to say and make sure that we're testing more of the chemicals that are going into the systems. I just heard that Bradford White in Middleville, that's where I live, is building a whole new complex, and they are dumping a lot of waste into the Thornapple River. And there has been public outrage at that too, but I don't think it's gotten anywhere.
So is this an issue that we don't have necessary regulations, or we're not enforcing them, or a combination?
Probably a combination of the two. But when we try as citizens to get more information, it's not available.
And the matter of the EPA setting a limit on safe drinking water levels when it comes to PFAS contaminants, so far the EPA has not made any pronouncement. We have a guideline of 70 parts per trillion, which is not enforceable. And when it comes to trying to make sure somebody might actually meet that standard, and then we find out the standard is probably about 10 times too high based on some CDC studies. So how do we resolve that?
Well, I think some of that is problematic because we really don't know, what is a safe level. We don't have enough experience with it. But like I said, we need to get more scientists involved and get that research done so that we do know what safe levels are.
So what do you see is the role of Congress in this situation? Is Congress sidestepping its responsibility?
Well, I would say so, for a reason. You know, they don't want, I call them protections. A lot of people call them restrictions, but I think we are entitled as citizens, taxpayers, to make sure that we are drinking safe water, breathing clean air. That should be a right of ours.
So when you think about your fellow Congress people, should you be elected, you'd be going into a situation where hopefully the House does shift its preponderance of Republican representatives to Democrats, but let's say it doesn't happen. And you're there sort of like an oasis of blue and a dot of blue and a sea of red. I mean, how would you actually, have you ever thought about that? And what you would do?
I have, and I quickly think, no, that's not going to happen, but it could. I think I would have to find allies on no matter what side of the aisle they sat on, that we could share common values and work on solving the problem together. And we might just have to start with one or two people and build from that.
But you think that's possible?
I think it's possible. It's not what I'd like, but I'm willing to work as hard as I can with whatever situation arises.
Well, I wanted to ask you about probably one of the most impactful elements of the Senate and the Congress and everything we've been going through in the past week with the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. The House doesn't really have that much to do with it.
Right.
But I'm wondering how you feel, just observing
Well, as a
this.
woman, I think that I myself have gone through a sexual assault as a 16-year-old. I know many other women who have. And it was a huge slap in the face to have Dr. Ford's testimony just, not taken seriously. And I don't see the FBI investigation as being a very serious tactic for the Republicans. They got their way, they pushed it through, and I hope that people, when they go to vote in November, realize, especially women, that this is a huge step backward for us, and we need to make sure that this doesn't happen again, that women are believed.
It's interesting because if you do end up in Congress, there has been a discussion that if there were a significant transfer of power to the Democrats, that it's possible an impeachment process could be opened up. How would you consider that possibility, and what would be the steps that you think would be necessary before you could consider voting for an impeachment?
I would need to know so much more than what we know now. I think that Mueller he cannot divulge much right now before an election, that if anything's coming out, it'll be after the election, which...
Well, you're talking about impeaching Trump.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you were talking about Kavanaugh.
But,
all right.
It seems to
be...
It seems
maybe they'll be related.
Yeah,
but
maybe those will be related situations.
All right. I think that if we have a majority in Congress, that maybe we could do a little more investigation and open that back up.
Yeah, it seems that that's where the discussion lies, whether they're Congress. I really am not informed on this myself. If you have the authority to open this up again and really push for another investigation. Although I suppose you could hold hearings.
I think you can, from what I've read, but it would have to be pretty serious for that. I mean, our agenda in January, if we have the majority, is going to be full, very full, because we have a lot of work to do. And that's going to take up a lot of time. So I think we would have to make a decision if it's worth our time to work on that. But
well, of course, Nancy Pelosi has said that it's not a starter with her, and there has been discussion about changing the leadership positions in the House. How do you feel about that? I mean, she is a very powerful woman.
She is, yes, and I think she's had her successes. But we also have a very dysfunctional Congress, and I think that if she continues, the dysfunction of Congress may continue as well. even if we have the majority. So I am very open to changing leadership.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the Cook Political Report has recently suggested that voter engagement may be actually shifting to the left here in West Michigan and Michigan in general.
Right.
What kind of impact do you think your campaign has had so far?
Well, we were one of 8 districts in the country last week that they shift more toward the Democrats, although we're still likely Republican, but that's a nice sign. I believe that I've been running for almost a year now, so I believe it's all of our efforts, mine and our volunteers and my staff, getting out into the district. It's a huge district, 4 counties, and a lot of territory, a lot of people to talk to, but I have been going to meetings all over whenever I can to find out more information about the concerns that people have in this district. And I've been connecting with people. I've been on TV shows now and radio, and we're pretty active on social media, so I think that the word's getting out.
What kind of reaction do you get from an audience that may have significant or even 1 or 2 Republican members? So they're meeting you for the first time and they're hearing your platform. What kind of response do you get?
Actually pretty good. We are trying to actually meet more Republicans, more centrist Republicans now when we do our door knocking, and we're targeting that. And what I'm hearing is that people are ready for a change, especially women. Sometimes they'll even whisper it to me if their husbands are in the other room, that I'm voting Democrat this time, because they're just so tired of being marginalized as a woman, from our president on down.
Well, and of course, to go back to Kavanaugh for a moment, one of the big concerns has been the shifting on the Supreme Court away from support for Roe v. Wade. Is that a concern that you have?
Yes, it is. It is. I believe that we know that abortion will happen whether it's legal or not. So I believe that we need to keep it legal and safe, because there are too many problems that could arise if it's illegal. But we do know that when teenagers have a comprehensive sex education program along with access to contraceptives, that the abortion rates go way down, and that's what we should be working on.
Yeah, nobody is really happy to have abortions be part of the landscape and certainly part of your personal life.
Right.
So hopefully, yeah, we would shift our emphasis to contraceptive information. Well, you're going to have your work cut out for you on a very big level.
Yes,
How will it change your life?
It will change it. You mean if I win?
Yeah.
When I win? Well, I've always been a very active person. I have a lot of energy. I'm a deep thinker. I enjoy meeting people and talking to people and working collaboratively with people. Even if we don't agree on everything, that's part of who I am. So I really look forward to it. And I look forward to coming back to this district on a very regular basis and touching base with people, because I know they're hungry for it. They haven't had it. And people want to know that you're listening to them and that you are representing them, what they would like to see.
Well, it doesn't seem too much to ask of our elected officials.
Right,
so
that's their job.
Truly. Well, just as a fellow Democrat and candidate, I certainly support all your efforts, Cathy, and I wish you the best of luck in November.
Thank you.
And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Deb. I appreciate it.
And if you would like to contact me with questions or comments, please send me an email to debhavensforkentcounty@gmail.com. And that's it for Kent County Closeup. I'm Deb Havens, and thanks for joining me and the production team here at GRTV in Grand Rapids, Michigan.